Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and of course, let's not forget, good following morning. This is AMA number 46, 46 weeks into it. Last week was, of course, not the AMA number before 46. 2 weeks ago was 44, though. And last week was, of course, a special edition with a number that we chose to skip. Very excited today for my guest, a good friend and an amazing woman, Elizabeth Szancer, who is very, very connected to Poland, involved in all different ways, family from Poland, all on different boards, very, very involved, and is an art advisor and art curator, and absolutely a fascinating person. We'll talk a little bit about her connection to Poland and her job. When you go to museums and you see all those amazing paintings and you think somebody had to advise and make sure they got bought and all this, that's Elizabeth. So we'll talk to her in a few minutes. Good morning, Saul. Good morning, Benji Lovett. Rabbi Avi, liking the beard. Why, thank you, Rabbi Avi. Is it Sean Connery? I hope it's not Sean Connery, but okay, I would take the somewhat of a comparison. Good morning, Jeffrey Rolat. Good to see you. These are the four horsemen of the apocalypse. Good to see you guys. As we get into it, what is going on in the beard is a little itchy. I have to tell you, I've never had a beard this long. Occasionally you get lazy in life, you don't shave for a week or two, fine. But this is already like, I don't know, this is probably 3.5 weeks, maybe a month or something. So yeah, something else. In terms of what's going on in Poland, first, a little update, things starting to reopen in Poland. That's not necessarily because things are getting much better. I just think they figured they kind of had to reopen things. So the malls have reopened. Kids in school, a little bit older, I think up to age of 9 or so are back to school. In terms of vaccine, I think about 1.5 million have been vaccinated in a country of 40 million. So going very, very slowly. Only medical professionals, I think teachers that are starting, older people over 80 are just starting now. So for example, none of our survivors have been vaccinated yet, just to give you an example, sort of a taste of where we are. Elizabeth Szancer on Facebook, chatting, commenting on Facebook and in the waiting room. Amazing double tasking of Elizabeth. See that? I said Elizabeth Szancer was very talented, and now we see she's in more than one place at once. Hi, Paulina. Paulina Fadash likes the beard. Oh, Paulina, if you like it, I'm keeping it. Of course, Jeffrey Rolat says, I need to rid myself of that beard. We will see. Sita, hello, watching with my dad. Sita, very, very important. What does my dad think of the beard? Because basically, as we know, I've more or less lived my life up to these 51 years of age with a very, very steady creed. Whatever my parents told me or suggested or did, I did the exact opposite. So we will see what my dad thinks of the beard. Okay, Marcel. Hey, Marcel, how are you? Good to see I recovered. Come on, Marcel, I was fine. 5 minutes. I want you to know, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the ride. And Marcel, thank you for the walk, and thank you for being there with us, Marcel. I walked the dog. Afterwards, I went upstairs. And straight away didn't take my coat off or anything and went and walked the dog. But yeah, last week was the Auschwitz walk, was the walk. Ryan Kaplan, Kasha and I walked from Auschwitz to the JCC. It was about 70 kilometers the way that we walked. Again, it's always we're always a little confused when we put the length of the trip, because by bicycle it's one thing, by car it's one thing, as the crow flies it's one thing, and on walking it's one thing. So for those of you who didn't see or weren't aware of it, we did walk last week, International Holocaust Remembrance Day, January 27th, and we did a walk that we call In Marcel's Footsteps. We walked 70 kilometers. It took us about 13 hours from Auschwitz to JCC Krakow. We started about 7 in the morning and finished at 8 p.m. And of course, we did it to honor all the survivors and the victims on International Holocaust Remembrance Day. But we were particularly inspired, of course, by Marcel Zielinski, who did that walk when he was 10 years old in 1945, in terrible shape. And we had a chance last week, which was amazing. Go find it on YouTube if you like, or on my Facebook, the talk with Marcel last week, talking about what he remembers from the walk and about getting to the orphanage in Krakow, and just amazing stuff. For me, it was it was inspiring. I thought it was difficult. I won't say that it was easy, not to complain about it or anything, or to compare to what was back in the day, but it was, for me physically, it was difficult. I felt good doing it. It was great doing it with Ryan and Kasha. We really had a good vibe going. We're joking, oh, what would we talk about? You want to talk all the time, but a lot of it, we were just sort of in our own minds. And of course we were speaking, but it wasn't like a nonstop blab fest the whole time. We very much had time to consider and to ponder. And it was very much, I think, in all of our heads, what had happened there, 76 years earlier, and the victims and the survivors, and Marcel as well. I want to read. I have it in Polish. I needed to have it. I'm going to read to you I want to read to you something very quickly. I got a letter from a survivor here, and his wife. He's a Holocaust survivor. He sent a letter that we got today, talking about his opinion, or their take on the walk, which I thought was very moving. So I'm going to read you. I have the Polish in front of me, and we won't use my translation. I'm going to read it to you in English. Dear Kasha, Jonathan, and Ryan, we were with you the entire time. We're very happy you have persevered, and we're proud of you. This fortitude, persistence, psychological strength, and most importantly, strong motivation show how we got to the miracle of today, with more Jews alive around the world than when Nuremberg laws were introduced and the Holocaust began. You have shown us how the impossible task of surviving in thousands in occupied Poland became possible. You have shown, and excuse my language here, you have shown a fuck you to everyone saying we're stupid, passive sheep led to the slaughter. The spirit of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising hero enlivens us, even though we live in times of safety and comfort. Heartfelt congratulations to you. We're really grateful and absolutely, completely overjoyed. And then Hannah and Dr. Victor Bodnar, who is a child survivor of the Holocaust, very active in our JCC, and they sent that letter, which was absolutely really inspiring. I don't think what we did was, to be honest, such a big thing, but the idea that it was able to inspire people and have people reflect on death marches and things that happened 76 years ago. But I think most of all, of the strength and the resilience of the survivors was something that I think we really feel, all of us feel. I'm sure I speak for Kasha and Ryan, that we accomplished our goals. So hey, Kuba Wishak, greetings from Warsaw. Anna Panek, Anna likes the beard. So there we go. We're having mixed, most people, I feel like the beard is winning so far. Most importantly, let me just state, most importantly, Kasha Leonardi, Kasha likes the beard. So as of now, as long as Kasha likes the beard stays. But we didn't only walk last week to honor Marcel and the survivors and just to do something crazy. We wanted to kick off the registration for our global challenge. The Ride for the Living, which we all know about, our bicycle ride from Auschwitz to the JCC, last year went virtual, and we're going to continue this virtual idea. We've rebranded it as the Global Challenge. We're going to keep it going, even though this year, hopefully, or certainly next year, the ride will return in person. But we saw the overwhelming response. Last year, 1,300 people signed up. We want to continue to give people an opportunity to participate and to go this 50, 60-mile distance from Auschwitz to Krakow. So this was the kickoff. I'm amazed, just amazed by the response that we had all around the world. We had over 1,000 individuals sign up, 6 JCCs, 2 Polish schools, and we're still 5 months to go before we get it. So I'm just reading the comments all about the beard. So we're very excited about the global challenge. We think that this is something really a special way that people can take the month of June, get in a little bit of shape for the summer, walk, run, or ride these 60 miles, and most importantly, honor the Holocaust survivors, and we're going to roll out something, a platform that people will be able to support their local Holocaust survivors. So I think that because of where we are in Krakow, we are the community near Auschwitz, the epicenter of the Holocaust, and we feel that it's very important for us, especially in this symbolic place, that what we do does not only affect our community, but what we want to do things on an international global scale. And we think this global challenge of people across the world joining us will be able to do that. So thank you, Natalie Claire. The incognito Natalie Claire likes the beard. Well, now it's definitely staying. Thank you for that. Eva Rogala likes the beard. Everyone's, oh, look at that. Everyone seems to be on, everyone except Jeffrey Rolat is on Team Beard. Better get with the program, Jeffrey. Better get with it. Although I've seen you with the beard, Jeffrey. I would say that you should not have the beard. Jeffrey, some of us don't have such a strong jaw and we need to have the beard. You, my friend, do not need the beard. Purim is coming up. It's a little complicated, of course. How should we celebrate Purim during these difficult times? So we can't have a Purim party, obviously, but we don't want to just not celebrate Purim at all. So there is a very cool sort of outdoor park here in Krakow with really cool different exhibition going on. I think it's Alice in Wonderland exhibition. Am I right? Okay, I'll be notified if I'm wrong. Then we will. Yes, it is Alice in Wonderland. Thank you. People let me know on the time date delay. So there's an Alice in Wonderland exhibit going on in this park near us, and we're going to because we can be there with spacing and sort of see each other. That we're going to have a bit of a Purim, let's say, get together in this park. So that's what's coming up. We don't want to skip Purim. For us, Purim is always a signature. Not only for us, but certainly here, Purim, a big signature event. We always have huge party and beautiful poster, and we like to all dress up in the same way, same theme. So that will continue it this year. It's Kasha who gets to decide. Amen. It is Kasha who gets to decide. No question about that. And Kasha, as for now, Kasha still likes the beard. So we will go. Robin Williams looks a bit like Robin Williams. Oh, thank you, Ruth. Sort of. I'm not sure. Yeah. Robin Williams, okay. I wouldn't mind being as funny as Robin Williams. Look like Robin Williams, fine. I guess I can accept it. There are worse people to look like. Fair enough. Benji, how to celebrate with Hamantash and not latkes? Actually, no. It has just been shown that Hamantaschen are not safe in these Corona times, and we will all be eating latkes for Purim. Just kidding. I will say I'm going to give a little shout out to Hamantash, which I don't usually do, since I'm firmly on Team Latka. But Kasha this week did an online workshop. Did an online workshop for Hamantaschen that we put online, and actually for a fundraiser. There's a Polish, the largest Polish fundraiser, and one of the things that we did was an online workshop for Hamantash. And Kasha made, I have to say, an amazing Hamantash, which was she melted krufki. I think many of you know what the candy is, krufki, like a caramel. She melted the caramel, put a little milk and almond slivers, and put that inside the Hamantash, which was out of control good. So although I am firmly still on Team Latka, I moved a little bit toward the side of Hamantash. So we're excited for Purim, and we'll have more Purim programming coming to you. So without further ado, I want to introduce my guest this week, and this is going to be a good one. My guest, as I said earlier, is Elizabeth Szancer. Elizabeth is a New Yorker. She is an art curator. Her company is called ESK Art, which is an art advisory firm. She's helping private collectors and museums, corporations for over 30 years. She started her career at the Whitney. She was an assistant curator at the Nelson A. Rockefeller Collection. She is the vice president of the Association of Professional Art Advisors. She's on the Empire State Plaza Art Commission. She's also on the Professional Fine Arts Committee, which the Professional Fine Arts Committee of the Foundation for the Art and Preservation in Embassies, helping to make sure there's beautiful art in embassies. She is very involved with the Noy Gallery. She is the principal, the principal art advisor to Ronald S. Lauder, who's one of the main art collectors on the planet. She's also incredibly involved in Poland, philanthropically, the American Friends of JCC Krakow, or the Friends of JCC Krakow, Friends of the Polish Museum, the Foundation for Jewish Heritage Abroad, the New Krakow Friendship Society, and also involved in the preservation of Jewish heritage in Tarnów. So, wow, all that going on, Elizabeth. I hope we still have time to talk. But thank you, just amazing stuff that you're doing. And I'm hoping to talk to you about your whole connection to Poland and Krakow and Tarnów and your involvement, and then also maybe a little bit about your activity in the art world, because I think that's something that most of us, me included, generally never have much of a window into. So welcome. Thank you so much for being with us.
Oh, thank you, Jonathan. I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you for asking me to join your weekly talk show as a guest this week. And I'm happy to talk about all those different parts of my life because I feel that my life is sort of a balance among my professional life, my Polish Jewish life, and my family. Those are the things that I'm most dedicated to, and not necessarily in that order, because to me always family comes first, and that's what really links me to Krakow and Tarnów. And you know, I have, my mother was born in Krakow, but my father in Tarnów. And I would say that, you know, I know that Polish Jews, survivors, descendants of survivors, have very, very different connections to Poland for many reasons, and we all know them. They don't need to be reiterated. And it's very individual. Some people have a strong connection. Some people would rather sort of dissolve that whole connection and not even remember it. For me, my roots in Poland, my Jewish roots, are extremely deep rooted. Yeah. Sort of like if I had to, you know, the shepherd's tree has the deepest roots of all trees, you know, 70 meters. And that's sort of my connection. Okay.
So I want to talk a little bit about because you have some very interesting family members that we're going to get to, some actually fascinating, famous people in your family, but maybe start a little bit with your parents. So one parent from Krakow and one from Tarnów. And maybe can you talk a little bit about their history, because they have a very strong also connection to the building, you know, to the building that I'm actually looking at right now through my window. So maybe talk a little bit about their history, how they met, their lives, and also maybe their wartime experience.
Oh, okay. Well, how many hours do we have? So I'll try to you know, it's a long nomadic journey from Ulica Venezia, their last residence, Ulica Venezia 9, and until the US. So yeah, so my mother was born in Krakow and my father in Tarnów. So in terms of the Krakow side, so my mother was born during the Austro-Hungarian, when it was still in the Austro-Hungarian Empire. So yeah, they were much older parents because of the war for me.
World War I.
Yeah, before World War I, right. And before, you know, Poland gained independence in 1918. So for both my parents, their first language was German. They came already from extremely, extremely assimilated families, both of them, and highly educated families, and maybe unusual for Polish Jews at the time, and also from cities. So they had a very sort of urban attitude towards many things and international. So my maternal grandfather was from Tarnopol. My maternal grandmother was from Badawice. And yeah, they were married already in 1906. They were married in Tarnopol. I just found that out. I just discovered that, which is curious to me. But anyway, my grandfather, Philip Silk, was a mechanical engineer. He had gotten his education in Vienna, as did his brother. They were sent to Vienna, to the university. His brother was an oral surgeon and stayed in Vienna. So he came back. He was assigned to a position with the PKP, the railroad, the official Polish railroad, and as an engineer to design specifically the Polish-Austrian railroad routes. And I've come across many of his patents and so on and so forth.
Oh.
So
I bet Tom is thrilled about that.
What?
I bet Tom is thrilled about that.
Yeah. My husband's such a train buff. It's remarkable how those things continue in strange ways, not even being blood relatives.
He must have sensed it about you, that your family has this train history, right? Rail history.
He so wishes he had known him. So because of that job assignment position was in Krakow. So he moved to Krakow and met my grandmother, who spent a lot of time in Krakow because Wadowice is not that far away. They had other family in Krakow. So it wasn't unusual that they would meet. So they met in 1906 and remained in Krakow, where my mother and my aunts were born and grew up. So, fast forward, they lived an extremely charmed life. My grandfather, because of his position with the railroad and the government, they traveled first class by train all over Europe, from early childhood. Education was stressed. My mother went to the Jagiellonian University, studied law. In only the second year that women were allowed to enter the School of Law. Her younger sister, also studied law at the Jagiellonian University, but her primary interest had been medicine. She really wanted to be a physician, but already the programs were shutting down for Jews. And so she was
toward the mid to late 30s. This would be.
Yeah. So it was the programs were already shutting down, right. And she couldn't enter, although her later husband, who was 2 years older, somehow was able to get into the Jagiellonian School for Jagiellonian University for Medicine. And he was one of those the bench Jews who had to sit outside the classroom, had to kind of steal a cadaver somewhere in order to whatever, but he was very determined and he was one of their best students. Later, he was a physician here in New York. Now for the temple synagogues, my grandfather, as I said, they were extremely assimilated. They didn't really practice any religion at all from a religious point of view, but they did have their traditions. My mother talked about going to her grandparents in Wadowice for the Passover Seders and spoke about how wonderful it was. My aunt did too. But that was about it. They went to the synagogue on the High Holy Days. My mother said that before they had cars, and my grandparents had cars before the war. They had two with a chauffeur, I should say. Yeah, they lost everything. So it's very easy they came here penniless. My mother had to borrow money for the voyage and pay the hospital bill.
No, but you think about cars, you think about how do you judge how do you judge wealth? And you say, oh, nice house and this, but to me, like thinking about it, cars before the war, like in Poland is like, that's like a thing,
Yeah, it was a big deal. So, but my mother said she remembers as a child going with she said the drushka, with the horse and buggy to be dropped off a block from the temple synagogue so nobody would see them riding.
Isn't that great?
In order to go to services.
The idea that they were doing it like when we did with I used to do my dad's watching, but let's just say theoretically I did that as a kid, and they were doing it with horses and buggies. Amazing.
Yes. Yeah, so traditions continue.
Absolutely.
And so he did that in 1924 when there was a renovation or addition. There was some work done to the synagogue. My grandfather participated as a supporter, a fundraiser, I guess, a funder of some of those efforts. And so, he was involved at large. And I actually found a record that he was in 1937. I found his name on a membership list for the B'nai B'rith. When I found that, my mother said, "Oh, that's not possible.
He's my brother."
Oh, there you go. So, on that side. So they were married at the Temple Synagogue, my parents. They were married there.
When? When were they married?
In 1932 already.
Yeah.
And in 1932. And my aunt and uncle were married there in 1939.
Right.
On July 2nd.
Yeah.
1939.
I don't think there were too many weddings after theirs.
No.
Before that, not too many.
No. And what happened there, and I actually found my grandfather's little notebook with the notes about all the expenses for my aunt's wedding.
Wow.
Yeah. But each of them only had about 17 people at their wedding. My grandparents didn't believe in big parties like that and showing off and things like that. They always said. So they had their dinners, each of them at the Hotel Francuski after the wedding ceremony. Yep. And but so just like my grandfather had done for my mother, he sent my aunt and uncle, and you have to think about the timing, on a 3-month honeymoon throughout Europe by train, because he had done that for my parents. And just before, at the end of August, he called them back. They were in Norway.
Aye.
He called them back. And unfortunately, they did come back. The other thing he had done,
not to listen to your parents, I think is the lesson, right?
Yeah. So P.S. they did come back. The family departed Krakow together from this address on Ulica Venezia, which was their last address. When my mother and aunt grew up, for any of you in Krakow, you could see this address very easily. They grew up on Józefa Piłsudskiego, number 17. Yeah. Now it's a very large home, but then it was a very large home, single family home. Yeah. And now there are multiple, companies in that building.
You don't have any of those, you know what? Except I don't think you really have any of those left in Krakow that I know of. In the center, the house that used to be these big single family homes that were built that way that are still single family. I don't know of one.
We did sell. There was another home that my grandfather, aside from being an engineer, was a real estate investor with a partner, another Jew, Abraham Rattler, who never returned. No one from the family returned. So there were a number of properties that remained in the family that we had, and that they never lost. Another unusual story. So there is one on Krupnica, number 16. That was a wedding gift to my aunt. And we sold that property to one person, but I don't know now.
I know the street well, because it's a very heavily trafficked street. And I'm sure that, none of those on Krupnica, which is a very sort of exclusive street in Krakow. Google used to have their headquarters on Krupnica, and there's like different restaurants, very hip. I don't think any of them are single.
Street.
Yeah, none of them are single family houses. It's almost like looking at the big turn of the 20th century mansions on Fifth Avenue, and thinking of them that none of them anymore. All of these that's the Whitney, the museum, and things like that the Whitney or whatever that were these grand sort of estates. But tell me, so what was their war experience? Your parents?
Yeah. So my parents, their war experience. It was my mother who pushed them to leave on September 3rd, They left Krakow on September 3rd. Most of her family members didn't believe that they should go.
Yeah.
I figured, we'll wait this out. We'll see, as many people did. But my mother went into a panic mode. And I have to say, I do think my mother was responsible for the fact on many levels that my family survived, a number of times through, and that they could come here. So she pushed it, and they left together. They left with their 2 cars, and a number of them. So, it was my grandparents, my aunt and uncle. He left his father behind in Kazimierz, and ultimately he was killed. And my parents, right, my maternal grandparents, my paternal grandmother, my paternal grandfather had already passed away. And they left also with these cousins from Wadowice, but only 2, the father and son. And he had a sister and a mother, and they were sent to Auschwitz. So, and they survived, the father and son. And my great uncle, Wilhelm Kluger, was a lawyer in Wadowice and head of the Jewish community of Wadowice. So they left together, and they survived. My grandfather died in the forced labor camp in the Soviet Union in Siberia. They went first to Tarnów from Krakow to stay with my father's family there, and tried to wait things out to see what would happen. Then they went further east. They went to Tarnopol because there was family there. My grandfather also had 2 sisters, and one was there. So they went to Tarnopol and waited. But it was from Tarnopol that many of these deportations happened, starting in 1940, to Siberia. And it wasn't just Jews, it was also Poles, prisoners of war. They went east because they didn't want to go west towards the Germans. They were already aware. I mean, Poland was divided very quickly, and they knew what was happening. So that's why they went east. But they were deported, and they were put into cattle cars for 4 weeks and packed in, and they had no idea where they were going. The only thing they were told is, now, if you come with us, you go to freedom. If you stay here, you'll go to the Germans. So they did it, but packed in the cattle cars, people were dying of starvation in the cattle cars, just like, the ones sent to the other camps. But, and they landed in this sub-freezing weather in a forced labor camp, which luckily was not an extermination camp. But the forced labor conditions were really, really terrible. They got they got bread and a potato maybe to eat, depending on how many trees you cut down and how successful you were, because that's what you did, outdoors, outside labor all day. For
I guess
hours.
it was positive that they were able to stay together.
Yeah.
Which wasn't not automatic.
No, it wasn't. They lived, though, with many other families, like in a barrack. My grandfather, because he was very, very handy, he built them beds out of the wood. I mean, he really tried to, and he was out doing some deal for meat or something, and they found him dead on the road. I mean, between the starvation, the cold, and everything.
Yeah.
So he didn't survive, and he's buried there. And I have a little map of where they buried. My father and uncle had to find a Jewish cemetery. It was not easy, but they had to bury him. So so from there, when the Allies changed sides and they could leave, my father got word from a very close friend to go to a certain town that Polish soldiers were being recruited by the Anders army which was under the British. And that you'll have it better. He and my uncle were going to go together. My uncle got typhus, couldn't go. And so they decided my father should go, that at least it's an out. Because then the families of those in the army were able to also take an army train to get out. So that's how they figured it out. Yeah. My father went to the army, to Iraq, the Middle East, later to Italy for 2 years. He was in Italy, Battle of Monte Cassino, all of that.
And where was your mom?
My mother and the rest of her family, they went to the Middle East. They were refugees in Tehran, which there were thousands of refugees.
Yeah, I didn't know that, your parents, wow.
It's a big story. It's not, there were thousands. Wow. Oh yeah, and then
they spent the war in Tehran?
Well, from 1942.
Right, that part, until the end?
In Tehran and Beirut, 5.5 years.
Wow.
And they really were figuring, when the war ended.
Did they speak Farsi? Did they learn Farsi, Arabic, or how is that?
They learned everything.
Yeah.
But my mother, they already spoke English, most of them.
Yeah.
My grandfather had the foresight to give my mother English lessons when she was 12.
Yeah.
So she was able to get a job at a British officers club because of her English. So they had a way of, and my uncle was a doctor, so he worked in a hospital. Yeah. My father, luckily in the Army, he was a pharmaceutical chemist, my father. So he was in the medical corps. So that was lucky too.
So if we fast forward a little bit, so your father survives the war in Anders' army. The rest of the family is in Tehran and Beirut. And then the war ends. Where do they reconvene? I mean, eventually they get to America, but where do they? Not some of them.
My parents.
So how do they reconvene?
Oh, that was not easy. So they didn't for a long time. In 1947, my mother and the rest of that family. Well, no, my mother, her sister, brother-in-law, and parents came to New York. And it was a long story there too.
Okay, so they came to New York, and your father? My
father had two choices. If you were in the Anders army and afterwards you had two choices. You could stay in the army and go to London, go to England with the army, or they would send you back to your homeland.
Yeah.
So my father chose London. I mean, of course, they knew after 45, the way Europe was divided, they would never go back to live in Poland. But that was it. They were always hoping to return.
Your father, after London, your father comes to the U.S. Your parents Okay, nothing is. I see that nothing is straightforward.
Much later. No, my mother was in New York for a few years before he came. He didn't want to leave London at all. He really wanted to stay and live in London.
But eventually, your parents reconnect.
Well, eventually, it's a long story. My mother went back and forth several times. She earned some money here. I have all the things of her passage. The Queen Mary, the Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mary, the Queen Elizabeth, back and forth, because she had already, the minute she got here in 47, she applied for citizenship. They had no citizenship. They were people without a country.
Yeah, you were born in New York.
Yes.
So they eventually.
Yeah, they did. But after my mother also went to live in London with my father for quite a while.
If they had a passport from every country they'd been in, you'd have like 25 passports.
Yeah.
So I got a little about, first of all, I know you for a while, so I understand this a little bit, but maybe just for people watching, and I picked up a little bit when you were talking that, as we know, people who have survivor parents or people coming from Polish backgrounds have very different experiences dealing, or their parents, the way that the information has been transmitted from their parents to them. And Michelle, who's watching, who is asking about, by the way, if you know the name of the Siberian labor camp that they were in.
I do. I'll get it for you. I have it written down.
But somebody like that, Michelle, who had, so very specific, and came back to Poland very often, had this, very strong father, kept this very strong connection. What were you told about Poland growing up? Was it something, was it, the Poles are, was it focusing on the anti-Semitism, or was it, because they had a pretty good life, very good life, most of the time, essentially more or less until the war. So what was your general, were you positively, negatively, or neutrally predisposed to Poland growing up?
Okay. I was positively predisposed to Poland, to pre-war Poland.
Well, yeah.
Because my parents, really were upset more about, the Soviet takeover. They had already been living under Stalin, and they said they could never, ever do that again. But because they both had very charmed childhoods, because they were both older and really had grown up, as individuals in Poland, been educated there, their lives were not cut off as children,
Yeah.
And disrupted as so many of the parents of my contemporaries, right?
Right.
Their experience was different. And, I've told you this, Jonathan, my mother would refer to Krakow as, and so would my aunt, as her beloved Krakow, because her memories were just so fond of her youth there and her experiences there. But they never intended to go back. And of course, their feelings changed. But the connection was there. My father, I feel, always was quite a Polish patriot, and this too. I mean, most of my family converted. My father was one of the only ones that remained Jews, is a Jew. I have a couple of cousins.
Yeah. Well,
but they were very assimilated and involved in Polish culture.
Do you remember what was your first time coming back to Poland?
Okay. My first time coming back to Poland was with my mother in 1976. Okay. In the summer of 76.
Why your father was...
Okay. My father passed away in December of 75.
So how was it that, why was it that you only came after he passed away?
Because they hesitated. I think she wanted to come more than he did. He still felt very connected to it, but as long as the Soviets were there, he was very anti-going there. It was about the Soviets. It wasn't about the Jewish experience.
Right.
You see?
Right.
So
they had their specific Soviet experience, and that was almost independent of the Jewish and anti-Semitism of the Soviets.
My father was very involved. My father was also, in addition to being a pharmaceutical chemist, sort of his day job, my father was a writer. My father was an international pen writer. He was part of the International Pen Club, and with over 200 articles published on many, many interesting subjects. But he published in 5 languages. He spoke 8. He published in 5, and and he was involved with many organizations still related to Poland, in London, in New York, the Polish Institute of Arts and Sciences. He was an esteemed member. Things that maybe other Jews wouldn't have done.
Yeah. So
they had a circle of friends, which also was unusual, I think, for many survivors at the time, where they had, of course, many Polish Jewish friends, and they only spoke Polish. My parents never spoke Yiddish, right? It was always Polish. They spoke Polish at home. It was my first language. That's
as assimilated as you get.
That's right. Yet they had another circle of friends, 2 other circles of friends that was highly unusual for people like them. They had a circle of American friends. My father worked for a large company. My father he was in the international division, for the Helen Rubinstein cosmetic firm. He knew her. She was a Polish Jew. So
from Krakow.
He hired him from Krakow, of course.
Krakow, of course.
So
all roads.
He traveled a lot, and so they had American friends, and they had a big circle of Polish friends, not non-Jews.
Polish.
Yeah.
Elizabeth, maybe just quickly, because I'm mindful that, first of all, it's the same, to be honest, the same as every time I call you to ask you a question, and you and I just go and we can talk for whatever. It's great. So a couple things I want to touch on, but maybe very, very quickly, do you remember just a couple minutes maybe of your first impression of coming to Poland in 1976? Yes. Because I want to talk about the Jan. I want to talk Szancer. I want to talk Kluger a little bit. I still want to get to the art stuff. So. And
I know I can.
No. It's both. It's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. We always have this. So, but I want to make sure that I'm mindful of your time as well.
Well, I came with my mother, and I think she was a little numb when we went because she, had just lost my father,
Right.
and it was a very tough time. She was inspired to go because of these family properties that they had always maintained, because you could claim your properties. There was a brief moment in 1946 where you could claim your property. As we know, most people didn't, and that's why they're trying to still get them now.
So that's how your family actually got all those properties, because
my father took care of it. In 1946.
Very rare. Very rare.
Yes, but he took care of it. And then during his lifetime, post war, my father was the one in the family that managed the properties for my mother and her sister. So he was the one. They had lawyers there, they had this there, I have tons of correspondence, with the onion skin paper copies, distributed to my aunt and uncle copy. I mean, he was very, very precise about everything. So now he wasn't here to do it anymore. And some of those records had to be transferred. In the meantime, my grandmother had passed away. There was a whole street that my grandfather had developed with his partner, Elizabeth Szancer. All of those buildings, the entire street, they developed. So, it's so funny, they were real estate developers, before the war. And there were certain issues on those properties that were still in my grandmother's name, because he kept 3 for himself. That had to be transferred. So she had to go and deal with a lot of, just like today, it's impossible to deal, between the Gamin and the records. So that's what drove her to go. And my impression was, of course, we went to see all their homes and all their things, and I still met friends of theirs that were alive and sort of known people in Krakow. And it was a difficult time. Communism was there.
How long did you stay?
Oh, we were there 3 weeks.
And do you remember where you lived?
Yes.
In a hotel?
No. We lived, it was very near the center. I don't remember the exact name of the street, but it was very, very near the center. We stayed with her friend, one of her friends, because the friend said that the hotels were awful. So we stayed with her friend, who was the wife, her husband, she was the widow of Jan Marcin, the writer, who was the writer for the monument at Płaszów, the Jewish monument. Jan Marcin. His name isn't even on the monument, I think. But anyway, so we went to Płaszów because my mother knew what had happened there. She didn't tell me then. I didn't find out till only a few years ago. She always said, yes, I knew we had friends on Schindler's List. We had friends. She never said we had friends and family on Schindler's List. We had family that perished in Płaszów. I know that now.
Right.
So they didn't talk much about that.
Elizabeth, maybe let's touch a little bit on your famous relatives, because it's, especially for Poles watching, it's fascinating. And one, there's a wonderful exhibition now in the Galicia Jewish Museum about your cousin Jan Marcin Szancer, who is I don't know what, the Shel Silverstein of Poland. I don't know exactly how we would.
Or Dr. Seuss.
Dr. Seuss, well, Dr. Seuss' poem. This is Locomotive. This is the famous poem by Tuvim and illustrated by your cousin Jan Marcin Szancer. So can you maybe talk a little bit about him? And then I want to ask you, not forget also about, and I have the other book which you gave me. I have the book by Jerzy Kluger. I'm prepared today, Elizabeth.
You're prepared. All right. So I'll try. So Jan Marcin Szancer was a cousin of my father's, also born around the same time as my father. He passed away in 73. My father passed away in 75.
Were they friends?
What?
Were they friendly?
Yeah.
They were friends, yeah?
Yeah, they were in touch. I found correspondence between the two of them. And books, I can't remember. I have books that were given to me when I was about 5 or 6 years old, and somebody came with them, I remember, to visit. And so I have a large collection of his books, but and now I can't remember if it was him who came or somebody else who brought them. I thought it was him, that maybe he was here on something official, but I don't know if it was likely that he would have been able to travel to the US.
I bet you could probably find out if there were records. I mean, it's not like people were just willy-nilly traveling. So maybe
No,
the government would know if Szancer left Poland and went to America. I bet that's knowable, right?
Yeah. So yeah, so I knew about him at a very early age, and the locomotiva, you know, I have actually a very early copy, and I have it as plastic. Yeah, so so he is probably, yes, one of the most well-known illustrative children's books. He did set designs, he did costume, he did many things.
Every single person in Polish knows, you can ask any single, just so people who aren't necessarily non-Poles watching or people who don't realize.
Yeah.
Any single person, you could ask anybody over the age of 5 in this country, every single person knows who he is and grew up looking at his illustrations, everybody. And
somehow he was lucky enough to survive the war in Poland.
Yeah, and that's
you know, he has a story too about that.
And it's a wonderful exhibition, and I hope that it does become a traveling exhibition, because the world is the world, and it is. But it's what a shame, the timing of it, that people haven't really been able to see it in the numbers that of course they should. But I'm sure, I hope that they will.
I hope so. We're working on it. We're trying. Good. You know, I know the museum is trying very hard.
I'm sure it will be. They do a good job getting it. They do a good job having their exhibitions around. I always see everywhere. So here's a less known relative who's Jerzy Kluger, which people maybe don't know. Maybe it tells a little bit. The Pope, when he was growing up in Wadowice, where you mentioned that your relative, your great uncle, I guess, was the head of the Wadowice Jewish community.
Well, my great uncle.
So,
but his son was Jerzy Kluger.
So the Wadowice is famous all across the world, and especially in Poland, because John Paul II grew up in Wadowice. And John Paul II had a very, very close friend growing up, a Jewish boy named Jerzy Kluger, who wrote the book, The Pope and I. And Jerzy Kluger is your cousin.
Yeah, his first cousin. And I knew him well because he was very close to my mother and my aunt. They were first cousins. You know, they had left together. He, after the war, first he was in England too. His father was in England. I did meet his father when he was still alive, Wilhelm Kluger, in London with my parents when I was a little girl. And I remember going to see him. And he and the Pope remained friends throughout life.
Yeah.
Till the Pope.
They had coffee, didn't you tell me? I think
once a week they had breakfast together. Because what happened was my cousin, Jerzy, he was, we called him Yurik, he was a tennis player. And he was on a traveling tennis team, even as a senior, well into his 80s. Yeah. So he didn't like the weather in London for tennis outdoors. Then he moved to Rome with his wife. And so they lived in Rome, probably, I think, from the early 50s.
Oh.
Yeah, in Rome.
Before the Pope. Before the Pope.
Way before the Pope, but they stayed in touch. And then he would see the Pope when the Pope was still Cardinal of Krakow. He would come to Rome and they would see each other. And
what did he tell you? I guess you may have talked. I mean, did he give you any interesting impressions about the Pope beyond what people thought? Yeah. They were close friends, but I mean, what was the Pope like?
What he stressed was, he was very friendly. The Pope also was interested in things like skiing and other things too.
Yes,
they had a lot in common, and they had a lot in common. And he always talked about the Pope's openness, you know, in terms of Jews and so on, because he did have many, you know, growing up, he knew Jews in the Jewish community. These were his neighbors, and he understood them.
Had a Jewish girlfriend, people say.
Yes, yeah, before he became a priest. So, and I'm not sure about this, but I think she was killed, perhaps. There was something about that. And so they were very, very close and shared a lot of things. And there are many books and articles written about their friendship. There are, this is not the only one. There was a lot. And then when the Pope, as Pope, would go to Israel, he would ask my cousin to join him on those trips. Also, what's interesting, part of that family on my mother's side, Jerzy Kluger's wife was not Jewish. She was actually Irish, and they met during the war in Egypt. She was with the English army, there, and they met in Egypt because he also was in a division of the army where my father was. And so the Pope married when their granddaughter got married. The Pope married them at Castello Gandolfo at the summer.
The summer residence.
Yeah, the summer residence of the Pope, and that was only the second time that a Pope married, somewhat civilian marriage. The other one being Josephine Bonaparte.
Good company.
Yeah. So it's interesting. It's an interesting past.
It is. Elizabeth, I want to take a few minutes about, and we didn't, and talk a little bit about your art career, because it's equally fascinating in many ways. You're dealing with things at a certain level that people don't really, that it's very normally not exposed to. So can you maybe talk about just a little bit about your art consulting business, briefly, about what it is that you do, and maybe some insights into that?
Yeah, that would take years. Yes, the inside of the art business is complicated, and there are many ways of approaching this in the art world. So there are people who do all different kinds of things and how they go about it. So I have a firm, a small firm, and a consulting firm, and we advise high-end private collectors, as well as certain kinds of, again, high-end corporate collections on their collecting strategies. Mm-hmm. And we are a full service operation. It's called ESK Art. We're a full service operation. What does that mean? So we do everything from advising on a purchase, negotiating a purchase, mm-hmm. Perhaps helping to place something for sale.
So can I stop you for a second and ask, so in terms of high-end art, in terms of really, these things, whether it's old masters or contemporary, modern, whatever we're talking about, how much of that business, because when you say negotiate, how much of that is not done through auction? Because I assume with auction that there's not a need for negotiation, essentially, because it's an auction, or maybe you're buying at auction. But in terms of when you talk about negotiating, who would you be negotiating between? The purchaser and...
Yeah, so art, so we buy art in many different ways, through many different avenues, from many different, vendors. The vendor could be auction houses. Yeah, I bid quite a bit at auction, internationally, depending on the nature of the subject. But also we are connected to many private dealers. There are private sales through auction houses. They call private treaty sales, where it's not something that comes up at auction, but an auction house might be.
They're brokering it, and there would still be room for negotiation, which would be what you would. Yeah. There's
art galleries.
A whole world going on.
Art galleries. Mm-hmm. Artists. Any which way you could imagine. I was involved, there was, and I could just say, what do we negotiate, or what do we work on? I think that makes it more interesting too, for us. So we are not just involved with purchases. So we were involved, for example, we were involved in the purchase, and there were a lot of things involved with this and many different nuances of the Klimt Adele Bloch-Bauer for the Neue Gallery.
Made famous for people don't realize that in the movie Woman in Gold, right? Adele Bloch-Bauer, #1.
Yeah, exactly. Then most recently, I can share this because I can share things that are public.
Right. So recently there was a very big something.
You could find out. I can't share a lot of other things.
No, I wouldn't ask you to divulge anything secret, Elizabeth.
No. And if you really want interesting stories, that you have to speak to Tom about.
That's a separate AMA.
Separate thing. But so in COVID, and I'm very proud of this, that we accomplished this year. And some of you may have seen this because it was a big article in the New York Times just in December, where Ronald Lauder gave a major gift to the Metropolitan Museum of Art of over 90 objects of his very important arms and armor collection. The most important in the world. Yeah, in private hands.
In private hands.
Yeah, in private hands. It's major for the Met, for their arms and armor department, as well as it came with a financial gift. And the financial gift will make it possible for them to maintain the department and the staff, and for research and educational projects. Amazing. So it's huge. That was a 2-year project. I mean, just there was so much to figure out and how to do it and with whom to do it, working, with lawyers on their side, on our side. Maybe
I can ask you one piece of information about it without you giving, too much away. Was it clear to him where it was going and what was going, and it was just figuring out the million details? It wasn't like it wasn't that he wanted to necessarily give away his preeminent collection of arms and armory, and he wasn't sure where it was going to go, right? It was no question that
he always had the Met in his mind for it. But it came a question too: is it now? Is it later? Because you read about gifts that are given, upon someone's passing.
Right.
But what maybe now is a good idea because he can enjoy the whole idea of it. Things can go on loan. We have a couple of loans there now in a major exhibition of arms and armor.
I can't wait to come see it. I can't wait to come see it.
So it was very exciting.
It was huge. I remember. I read the article just because I read the article, and it was a huge article, and then I haven't talked to you, and I was like, oh wait, that was you. Like, I didn't realize. I was like, that was you.
Yeah. So the few times that I came into the city of New York, and I'm here now, I came in because we were dealing with the signage at the museum. We would go, the museum was completely closed, so we'd go on days off, when the museum was closed, rather, to the public, to check out the signage and is this approved, is that approved? Because now the galleries are named the Ronald S. Lauder.
All the text, it's a lot. It's a million little things. Elizabeth, do you have a favorite type of art?
I like, no, it depends. I mean,
favorite artist.
Yeah, like someone posted, I saw someone I know posted, I like Impressionism, even though they say it's the easiest thing to understand, but I still like it. Well, that isn't my most favorite thing, because I like artwork that's more challenging to look at. Impressionist works are very pleasing to look at in a way, sometimes, not all.
Relaxing in some ways.
Yeah, but I like things, more gritty subjects.
What about a favorite artist?
Subjects.
Favorite artist?
I have a whole range, and it depends. I mean, certainly because I've been so involved with Mr. Lauder's collection, and he has such in-depth collections of German and Austrian art, of Schiele and Klimt and Kubin.
Even the office, you could spend a long time just in the office, in the outer room of the office there on
which is a Viennese design based on
Yeah.
The Postal Savings Bank building by Otto Wagner in Vienna. Yeah.
It's a fun office. It's a very fun office to visit. What if I had to say, I'll tell you just one thing about the Noy Gallery, which is of course, where this collection is, or part of it, what he donated and created this museum, which is amazing, where the Adele Bloch-Bauer painting is, and the others that are with it. But I was never a big fan of Klimt. I always got, because I'd only seen it in posters, and it was like with the gold, and I wasn't so into it until I went there. And I went there, the first time I was there, I think with you, there was we were there for something, a pre-opening of something. And
I invited you to.
And seeing it in person, especially because we were there early and nobody was in there yet, seeing it in person absolutely blew me away, jaw-dropping. I've had very few experiences ever. I was in the Tate Modern in the Rothko. There's the room with the Rothkos, and once I was in there by myself, and I'm a big Rothko fan, but I've had very few experiences looking at art that blew me away as much as looking at that. Seeing it in person is no comparison, just the depth of the painting. It's absolutely something phenomenal.
That it is. No, it's true. It's true. No, it's wonderful. So I will say for anyone listening, that you will have a chance to have a little bit of a glimpse into Ronald Lauder's collection again in a more public way. I had curated the Neue Gallery's 10th anniversary exhibition with Mr. Lauder, and it was selections from his collection. That was in 2011. Across the centuries, just because it's the only time, the mission of the museum is only to show German and Austrian art within a certain period. That's it. But we did extend that for the 10th anniversary show to show Ronald Lauder's collection beyond his German and Austrian collection that people do get to see also in decorative arts at the museum. I mean, it's a tremendous collection of Austrian decorative arts. So, and I'm curating the 20th anniversary exhibition. Wow. It's scheduled to open. We had to postpone it a bit. It should have been 2021 as the 20th anniversary in November, but it's right now it's scheduled for February 2022. So I'm in the midst of.
That's very exciting.
Working on the catalog and so on.
Wow.
And there will be some overlap of the earlier show, and there will be many newer things just to show. So what's been the last 10 years?
I can't wait to see it.
Not grown? Where are the interests, and how do we go about it? So, that's where I will be discussing things like this gift to the Met and other things we've done with other museums, because that's critical too. It's not just about buying and selling.
Right.
Working with institutions, we work with a number of institutions around the world to support them. And in this capacity, I just want to say with what I do, if anybody's curious to learn more about what I do, there is an organization called artadvisors.org. That's our website, the Association for Professional Art Advisors. I'm the vice president and co-chair of membership. And so we're always looking it's by invitation only. We have about 150 members internationally. So if anybody knows about anybody in Poland who's doing something similar, take a look. We'd love to hear about them.
Or if anybody did really well with all the GameStop stock and stuff, then you want to park the money. Inflation start to be printing money, lots of inflation. What better way to invest than do some fine art with Elizabeth? Elizabeth, are you on Team Latka or Team Hamantash?
I don't know. Listening to that, I'm not sure now. I don't know. Now it's Hamantash time. I don't know.
It's tough time to ask. All right, we'll leave that out. And Elizabeth, your 3 favorite films.
Oh, that's interesting. I don't know. I have a lot of favorite films.
Gotta give me 3 if you can.
Okay, let me think. Favorite films. Well,
Woman in Gold.
No, actually, I didn't like it. I didn't like Woman in Gold.
Oh, that's a hot take. Well, you're such an insider, though. It's hard to like things when you know so much about it.
Well, I also think, I guess I feel, maybe protective or tied to Ronald Lauder. I feel he was portrayed so poorly.
Yeah.
That is not him, and that's not how he spoke with the family. And so I felt like, why he could have just played himself.
Yeah. Fair
Yeah.
enough. But what three? Give me three that you like if you can.
Oh, what would be my three favorite? I just recently rewatched. It's maybe not a favorite, but I thought it was really wonderful. I recently rewatched the Polish film Ida.
Yes, great.
And I like films like that. I like foreign films.
Yeah, it was a wonderful
A
film.
lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like older films. I like to go back and watch earlier movies. We saw Mr. Blanding's built his dream house. That was kind of interesting. And I said, oh, would that be my favorite? It's a favorite of a friend of mine. I don't know. So I don't know. Do I have any? I have a lot that I like and a lot of genres I like. I don't like sci-fi.
That's why it's a good question, because people are, it's torturous. It always tortures everybody.
Yeah. And I don't know. My husband Tom would give you his three right up the bat, right away.
I'm going to need that information. Elizabeth, thank you so much.
I'll think about that.
Think about it. I want to hear, and I want to hear Tom's as well. Elizabeth, thank you so much. This is so fascinating. Your family history is phenomenal, and I wish we would have had a little bit more time to talk, because I'm so interested in all that you're doing in terms of your art advisory. But it was just wonderful talking to you. Thank you for taking the time.
Oh, thank you for inviting me. It was a lot of fun, and it's always nice to talk to you.
Absolutely, great talking to you. Stay safe and well. Be careful in New York.
You too, and I hope to see you soon. Poland is on the top of my list. As soon as I can travel, I'm there. You know that.
I know, and New York City is on the top of my list, and visiting a certain collection of things is high on my list.
Okay, we'll do. It's a deal.
Absolutely. Be well. Love to Tom. Thank you.
Thank you, Kasha too. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Thank you.